10 most common interview questions, 20 most common interview questions, 30 most common interview questions. I mean, come on, guys, how many are there? The interview isn't really that complex. We know there are going to be 3 main questions. Tell me about yourself. That's almost always going to come through. A strength, a weakness. The other groups of questions are going to be motivational. They're going to be behavioural. They're going to be technical. They're going to be situational. So we know there are groups of questions, and within those groups, the behavioural questions are going to take different forms, but essentially they're looking for past behaviours predicting future performance. So instead of looking at these questions, and anyone can Google a list of 100 questions. I mean, that's not daunting. Anyone can Google 100 questions and start practicing those individual questions. What happens if the question's not asked in the way that you're expecting it to be asked? Panic? Freeze? What the hell? I'm going to answer it in the way that I've trained to answer it and sound scripted. Now, let's look at a better way of doing it. Let's look at stories, and I can give an example of the sales background and the sales questions where if I find a story, I'm going to be able to find answers to a multitude of questions. So just by looking at one story in detail and working through that story in my head prior to the interview, time after time after time, and that's not going to be difficult because it's your story. You know the intimate details. You know the bits that are going to trip you up. You know the bits that are going to flow. You know the bits that are awkward that you don't really want to talk about. But it's not really a problem because we've got the answers. And the story I would take would be one of my greatest successes. And the whole story has a background that prior to my greatest success was a bit of a disaster. That between the contractor and my manager, there was a complete and utter shitstorm, and most of it was rubbish. But it didn't change the fact that it had a detrimental effect on my reputation. But as far as the consultant was concerned, he was happy to recommend me to his colleague. And his colleague had some schools. So I went through the process of introductory meeting, how did I arrange the meeting, and I've got the prospecting side of it. I've got the cold calling side of it. I went to this guy cold, he didn't know who I was. All I had was to say that such and such a person had asked me to give him the call. That we then went through a CPD. CPDs are my worst nightmare. Scripted bollocks that you've got to follow. Absolutely horrible. Once the CPD was over, I could then hit my style. My style is a lot more freeform. Never have guessed that one. Is a lot more freeform, and I can then talk about the things that I want the consultant to hear. This garnered enough interest from him that the conversation continued, and he told me that he had a couple of schools that he was looking at, and they were early stage in the pipeline. So I said, okay, what problems was he experiencing, and how was the information I was giving him helping him to resolve those problems? That was clear, good. He sent me the drawings. I took the specification, I planned it all out, I made the selection, I gave him the specification, and we went forward, and I was specified for that. Absolutely brilliant. So we've gone from a huge problem to a huge success. And that story is going to be the backbone of so many questions that are going to come into the interview, that I could talk about problem relationships, I can talk about unhappy customers, not a problem because it turned into a success. I can talk about cold calling, I could talk about my strengths, narrowing a product, quite a complex product, into 2 or 3 points that are going to appeal to the customer. So instead of trying to answer 20 or 30 questions, I've got this story and I don't care how you ask questions, that story's never going to change. The strengths of the story are going to be the same. The weaknesses of the story are going to be the same. They demonstrate who I am as a person. They demonstrate my personal strengths. They demonstrate my weaknesses. They demonstrate what I can bring to the new company. So it's not looking at a star type answer. It's looking at a personal type answer. It's telling a story. People connect to stories. People connect to emotions. And people connect to what they're bringing to the new company. So you've got, instead of looking at all these questions, 20 best questions, 30 best answers, one best story. That story you're never going to forget. You've told people left, right, and centre about that story, colleagues, friends, I don't know. But you've told friends, that's in your head. That's never going to change. You don't need prompts, you just need one word. That's the story you're going to do. So let's knock these 20, 30, 40 best responses on the head and focus on the 4 or 5 stories that are clearly going to demonstrate who you are, what your strengths are, and we can work together to pinpoint the best stories that are going to detail your strengths, your weaknesses, what you bring to the company, problems you've dealt with, the theoretical, the behavioural. The technical side, that's kind of on you, because if you're an IT guy, I ain't got a clue on that. But we can look at the fundamental, the backbone, the spine of your interview, and that makes it easy. Once you've got the stories, you become a lot more relaxed. Once you're relaxed, you come across as confident. Once you come as confident, the whole atmosphere in the interview room is going to be significantly more positive, and you're going to stand out because you're not giving stock answers to what you think are stock questions. Stand out.